On September 4th, 2017, experienced diver Kyla Green went on a rescue mission in Key West, California. But what unfolded next was a sequence of events that opened Kyla's eyes to unimaginable horrors. Many horrifying secrets lie within the deepest depths of our oceans, ones that plague our nightmares and lurk within the watery shadows of our minds. This is Kyla's account of what happened to her, as written in a letter that she sent to one of her closest friends, Gabriella Carson. Beware, as once you see into the darkest depths of the ocean and the horror that resides there, you can't unsee it. Your perception of the world, both land and water, and what may be lingering in plain view will change forever. My dad was an adventurer who adored the ocean, so from a young age, he taught me and my siblings how to dive. I loved those hazy days escaping the real world and exploring this kingdom of colorful coral beds and curious, crooked rocks. Being there, immersed within the tranquil water, made me forget my troubles and served as a reminder that I was just a tiny bunch of particles in the big, wide world. Life was short. I just didn't realize back then just how short it could be. I fell out of love with the ocean when it took my dad away from me. The years passed by and my diving equipment gathered dust in the basement, and that's where it stayed. I vowed to never enter the ocean again, but in my heart, I always knew the ocean would call me back one day. I just had no idea that it would be the darkest part of it that lured me back and showed me a new level of darkness, one where something evil thrived. The phone call from my cousin Ryan came at 7 p.m. Through hysterical sobs, she managed to tell me that her boyfriend, Owen, went diving that morning at Key West and still hadn't returned. The Coast Guards had been called, but she begged me to let her borrow my diving equipment so she could go searching for him. Although Owen was a pro diver, he hadn't been himself for a while now. He had seemed vacant and disoriented, so the fact that he was missing was troublesome. I refused to let Ryan put herself at risk, so before I even realized what I was saying, I agreed to go diving in search for Owen. And the drive out there was a blur. At the shoreline, I felt the pulsing of my heart, and the desire to flee felt overwhelming. I had forced myself and my equipment over to the rocky edge, checked my air tank, mask, and wetsuit, and then submerged myself under the water. At this point, I didn't think I'd be of any use. I saw the red and white Coast Guard boat bobbing in the distance. If Owen was down here, they'd be the ones to find him, not me. But I made Ryan a promise, and despite my hesitation, I could not let her down. I had enough air to last me 40 minutes, tops, and I planned to go down there and search for as long as I could, but I never expected to find him. I just wanted to feel like I was doing something, that I was helping in some way. I reveled in the sheer beauty of the schools of glistening fish and colorful rocks. It seemed to pull me in, enticing me further and further into the darkest depths. I had a flashlight headband on, but the deeper I got, the more it started to flicker. I knew then that I'd gotten lost in the feeling of being there and forgotten my objective. I noticed the bubbles doubling around me and took this as a warning sign that it was my time to head back. But what happened next shouldn't have been possible, but I knew what I saw. It was Owen, free swimming ahead of me without any signs of distress. I saw him going deeper and deeper, and I didn't understand how he could be at this depth without an air tank. It was impossible. I turned and swam after him, slowed down by the bulkiness of my equipment and lack of practice. I stopped when I was about 60 feet down and in the endless vat of water. I looked around me for any signs of Owen, but I couldn't see him. I started thinking I'd imagined him, that I was decompressing down there and it was causing me to see things. I saw the water ripple around me and knew something was behind me. I turned to look, expecting to see a large fish, and that's when I saw him there. There was no mistaking him this time. It was Owen, all right. his maskless face clearly visible, his eyes enlarged, a demonic look on his face, and something gripped in his hand. By the time I registered that he was holding a piece of rock, it was too late. I saw his arm move through the water at lightning speed and felt that rock impact with the back of my head, and then the full body of his weight shoved into me, causing me to collide with the uneven rocks. Pain shot through my body as my surroundings seemed to splinter around me. I remember the feeling of being pulled forward and my body limp as it was pushed through the ripples of water. The next thing I remember is darkness, pitch black darkness. Pain throbbed through my entire body with such intensity it made me feel heavy, and a searing pain cut through my head as if it was full of shards of glass. I tried to make sense of where I was and what was happening. I felt around, feeling rough rocks and water lapping at my waist, but nothing at all in front of me. I took a chance and pulled my mouthpiece out and gasped for air. I could breathe. I heard water droplets falling around me with echoing splashes and smelt a salty, raw sort of smell, as if something was decaying. It made me want to vomit, and I had to swallow it back. I knew I was in an air pocket, in a cave of some sort, but an air pocket this deep and of this magnitude shouldn't have been possible. I tried to move, and that's when I realized the gravity of my injuries. I felt a pang of fire in my right shoulder blade, and down my side I knew some of my ribs were broken, and it felt like my shoulder was dislocated. It was a nightmare, but I knew I had to at least try and get out of there. I pressed my hand to my head to feel for my headlight and felt it there. I pulled it off my head and tried to feel it one-handed. I shook it out of sheer desperation, and the light flickered, casting a faint glow around me. My intuition was right. I was in what looked to me like an elaborate cave system with dozens of connecting passageways. Holding the flashlight out in front of me, I forced myself forward, wading my broken body through the water. I kept on pushing on, my air tank weighing heavily on my back. I checked the air gauge, but it was broken. I had no idea how much air I had left or even if my tank still worked. When I heard the rippling of water close to me, I knew I wasn't alone. I turned and saw him, Owen. He was in the water looking at me. That demonic look on his face making him almost unrecognizable. The panic filled me and I scrambled through the water, an agony I had to try and ignore. As I frantically moved forward, the light flickered out and darkness consumed me. I could hear my frantic gasp for breath and the water dropping around me, but I couldn't hear Owen. I didn't know where he was or what he wanted from me. I heard the rippling of water coming close by and knew it was him. He was gaining on me. I felt around me, trying to feel my way to safety, and I felt a dip in the rocks and pulled myself into it, taking a deep breath before submerging myself beneath the water. I stayed like that for as long as I could hold my breath, hoping it would be enough for him to pass me. I tried to find my mouthpiece to use my air, but I couldn't place it in time. Soon, I was rising from the water and silently trying to gasp for air. At first, I thought I'd outsmarted him. I waited there to be sure before I moved through the water, but then I felt a hand grip my injured shoulder and push me down against the rocks, catching my messed up shoulder. I screamed in pain, the headlight flickering on and off and showing me glimpses of what was happening. I saw Owen, a man possessed, there in front of me. He was spitting something out of his mouth. Something was crawling across his palm. It was long as an intestine, and glowing slightly, but there was no doubting it was alive. He dangled it out in front of me and stepped toward me, and then the darkness returned. I held my breath to hide my breathing sounds and held my good hand out in front of me. I listened and waited in the dark for him to strike. The silence seemed to vibrate around me, and then in a soundless movement I felt him reach me. I tried pushing him off me, fighting with the water instead. I heard him yelp, but I'm not sure what happened. I let my adrenaline take over and moved as quickly as I could through the caverns, my good hand guiding the best it could. It was a blur of madness. I carried on through the cave system, grabbing air where I could and gasping for breath when I needed to. Each movement I made grew more and more agonizing, and I was getting to the point where I was moving on pure adrenaline and grit. I knew my body would collapse soon. It was just a matter of when. I kept on going while I still could, clumsily feeling my way through the passageways. These strange sounds seemed to echo around me, a scratching sound. I turned through a narrow corner. I had to squeeze myself through it. It was so tight, and for a horrifying moment, I thought I would be stuck there. Easy prey. When I pushed free, I sighed in relief, and I entered a small cavern, the walls glowing with this browny, golden-colored slime. It allowed enough light to see the tight space around me and spot Owen there, partly in the water, clawing at his own skin with a jagged piece of rock. I saw blood trickle into the water, his blood. But he didn't stop slicing the rock through his flesh. I stopped there frozen, terrified of alarming him and having him stop using the rock on himself and instead use it on me. I pressed my body against the wall and tried to slide forward. But then he turned and saw me, distressed eyes locking onto my petrified eyes. He held up his bloodied arm, bits of flesh hanging off of it, and in a whisper said, "I'm sorry. It made me. It will make you too." And with that, he took the rock to his head and sliced it across his temple again and again and again. Hanging flesh, gushing blood. It was an endless horror that I couldn't escape. I knew I had to get away from him, so I tried to move out of that cave and back into the darkness. But as I moved my body away from the wall, I felt something stick to me, gnawing at me. It was the glowing things. They were alive. They slithered over me, tearing at my wetsuit and gnawing at my skin. I tried pulling them off me, but there were so many of them. All I could do was scramble forward as I shook myself and desperately swiped my hands over those things. I thought they were going to gnaw me to the bone to eat me alive. I thought they were going to gnaw me to the bone to eat me alive. All I could do was try and flinch them off me and keep on moving. I fell into the next cavern, one of darkness, and the glowing creatures immediately dulled. I continued trying to wipe those things off me, but I couldn't see them, and I couldn't feel them anymore either. I heard faint splashes in the water around me and convinced myself it was the things falling off me. But despite this, I couldn't stop shivering. Terrified those things were still secretly on me, chewing through my flesh and turning me into bone without me even realizing it. Nothing about these caverns made any sense, and nothing here surprised me anymore. I carried on. That's all I could do. On and on until the rocks didn't seem to surround me anymore, but openness did. I thought I was dreaming, but I didn't have the energy left to do anything about it. I let the water take me. Floating somewhere. Up or down, I don't know. I just remember feeling lifeless and thinking this was it. This was my end. I remember the bright light and arms gripping around me. I thought it was Owen back to get me, to drag me back to that place, but I couldn't stop him. I had no fight left in me. I was on a boat. Divers staring down at me through steamed-up masks and the moon glowing in the night sky. I panicked when I saw the light. In my confused state, I thought it was those things back to bite through my skin. As I tried to move, the pain hit me. I've never felt a pain like it. My shoulder, my ribs, my entire body was burning. Just breathing was agonizing. And the next thing I remember is the stillness of the hospital. My injuries were severe, but I was still alive. I didn't understand how. I didn't tell anyone about Owen. I couldn't. How could I? A man swimming that far underwater without air, they would have told me I was mad. Ryan visited me and told me the rescuers hadn't found him. They found me instead. She had accepted the fact that he was lost to the ocean. He was lost to the ocean like my dad was. I tried to put the nightmare behind me and move on with my life. And for the next few months, I did just that, but I was living a lie. I felt myself changing. I had a constant hunger for something I couldn't seem to understand, a gnawing in my head as if something was eating away at my thoughts and in doing so changing them. All I could think about was the ocean, how I needed to go there and how I needed to take someone there with me. I think something is inside of me. Something parasitic. I can feel myself changing a little more each day. It's just like it was in Owen. He warned me that this would happen. He warned me it would take me too. I'm scared. More scared than I can put into words. I want someone to help me, but I've accepted the fact that I may be beyond help. Tell everyone I love them, and I'm sorry. There's darkness down there, and there's darkness in me. A darkness in the glowing light. Kyla Green was last seen on January 7th, 2018, walking along the Key West shoreline without any diving equipment. Despite extensive searches of land and sea, she has never been heard from since. Kyla's closest friends and family noticed significant changes in her personality after she returned from the ocean. They say she was always distracted, as if she was never fully there again. At the time, they put this down to the trauma of what happened, but now they believe it was due to something more. Whether Kyla returned from the ocean with a parasitic creature living inside of her or not, it remains unknown. But the fact remains that something happened to her, something unexplainable. Much of the ocean remains a secret, one as ancient and foreboding as the universe itself. Who knows for sure what horrors lurk down there in the deepest depths? For more scary horror stories, please subscribe. See you in the next video.